You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work.
You're listening to Avengers Chronological Countdown with Jamie and Ryan.
На склоне наших лет, нежнее любимый, сияй, прощальный свет.
Before we get started, two quick things. The first is that this episode will seem like it's ending, and then you're going to hear a little bit of Rafferty's Baker Street, and then we pick up again. We had some additional thoughts that we wanted to make sure we added onto the episode after a couple of weeks after we'd recorded it. So anyway, just stick through 15 seconds of sax solo, and then there's like another 10 minutes. But we totally forgot to make a correction. I think I said Florence Pugh is American or Canadian. That's 100% incorrect. I believe she is actually British. So when you get there to that point, you say, for shame, Ryan, she's British. But anyway, wanted to make sure I got that correct. Anyway, on with the show.
Take this away from there. Put that there.
Okay. You ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Jamie Steens.
And we are talking about
Black Widow from 2020, 2020, 2021, and 2021. This movie's been a long time coming.
Yeah. It got pushed back several times. I get confused as to the big superhero movies I was waiting for in 2020 were this and Wonder Woman 1984.
Right.
And I don't remember when they were supposed to come out eventually.
Wonder Woman got pushed back for non-pandemic reasons even before last year, so I don't know. It had issues, but that's not the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah. So this one, they brought in a new director on it. Her name
Kate Shortland.
Kate Shortland, and I was looking her up briefly before.
It doesn't look. It looks like she did a bunch of TV and has done a few movies, but this is probably her big budget debut.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is Marvel has always kind of taken this tack of kind of going and getting, I don't want to say, there's no such thing as art house anymore, but kind of people who've done smaller, more character-based independent features. Mm-hmm. And I think the proof's been, in the pudding as far as, Marvel, people from the outside who don't watch Marvel movies tend to, guffaw at them. Oh, it's these expensive superheroes. But,
right.
They have a lot of good character development in these movies.
I think that's why they work. Because you care about these. I mean, this is a character that, spoiler, if you haven't seen Endgame, you shouldn't be listening to this, is dead. In the current timeline. Mm-hmm. And it's her backstory. This is a story from 2016.
Yeah.
And if you don't care about the character, you were not going to give a crap about this movie.
Yeah, it's a weird setup because it's a movie in which you absolutely know the character is going to survive.
Well, and I will say, so Ryan and I have not talked about this movie. We watched it last night before we went to bed, and we didn't say one word to each other afterwards. So this is the first time hearing each other's
We wouldn't even
opinion.
make eye contact.
Yeah. No talking at all. No. I really enjoyed this movie. I very much did. I thought it was solid. Characters were great. Story was good. Cared about what was going on. If there was something that prevented me from saying this best movie ever, love it, love it, love it, it was the fact that it was kind of handcuffed by this character's not alive anymore. There wasn't that sense of urgency. Like, it was in this... It takes place in the past, and this has already happened. And I don't know. For me, that was a little bit of... It just prevented it from being that extra step in spectacular for me. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Reaction to that or what?
No, I mean, I didn't think about it a ton. I did consciously have a few thoughts pop up every once in a while, like, well, I guess we know Nat makes it out of this okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like when you don't watch normal superhero movies that, you have fear that our hero is not going to make it out to the end. If their name is in the title of the movie, they're probably going to be okay. But, I mean, there's a guarantee she's going to be okay because you've seen her after this.
Yeah, it's kind of the weirdness of Temple of Doom coming after Raiders, of them setting it earlier.
Yeah.
Which I understand cheekily why they did it, but
Honestly, I never think about that when I'm watching that movie.
Yeah.
I always think, it's a standalone. I don't think about where it takes place in the timeline.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it is a little bit of a hamstring. I will say I think I hit about a B- on this one, and
that's fair.
The structure of it was mostly fine, and I brought up the director and the character stuff right out of the offset because I knew we'd talk about what we liked or didn't like, and I wanted more of the character stuff in this film. The set pieces, the big action pieces, overwhelmed the first half of the movie for me.
I would agree with that. You didn't really get a lull until, probably 2/3 of the way through the movie when they were sitting around, talking to each other. I think it's difficult with characters like these that are so on their own. Just as by nature of what they do, they're very independent. They have been taught to not rely on anyone else. Because 3 of them were raised in the Red Room, which I'm only familiar with because they've referred to it. I've not read any of the Red Room based comics stuff, but. So yeah, they're prickly. They're prickly people. So yeah, when they do start talking to each other later on, that's kind of the most enjoyable part of the movie.
Right, and that was kind of where I think I struggled with it a bit. Was it has to get you invested in what's going on in the action sequences, you have to be invested in the characters, and we had 2 fairly major action sequences. One was Nat and Yelena in the apartment in Budapest.
Right.
And that bleeds immediately into what I would consider to be the second piece, is when they introduce the Taskmaster chasing them down the streets of Budapest. And that's a lot of action piled on top of itself. And I was like, I still don't know really if she's a good guy or a bad guy, or what her deal is, other than I know that they're not genetically sisters, but they're sisters.
Yeah.
And in a movie like this, that's not enough for me, and that's me.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think what anchors this movie is the fact that you do know Nat very well. You care about her already. And I've been waiting for, a standalone Black Widow movie for a long time. Knew that Scarlett Johansson, could absolutely anchor her own movie and carry it, and she does. So yeah, I think that's if this were a movie in which you had never seen the main character before, that would be really, really difficult in the beginning, following her around, because, you don't get a lot of who she is. I mean, from this movie in the beginning, you already know it because you've seen the other movies. Mm-hmm. And I think it hangs its hat on that.
Yeah. And I think the problem then for me came in of so I actually bought the first full appearance of Yelena back in the day, and so comics in the 90s, it was either the late 90s or the early 2000s, like really early, like 2000, 2001. I was working in an office on campus and ran to the comic shop and came back, and my comics were sitting in a pile on my desk. And I last night went and looked, and I saw the cover of the one I bought. I think I bought a very special cover by accident, and but it had Yelena on the cover. I didn't even realize it wasn't Natasha at the time. I thought, oh, they miscolored her hair or something, because she's wearing the Black Widow outfit and all that. And in Denby picked it up and was like, what softcore porn are you reading here?
Oh, geez.
Because of the way they were
Was
drawing.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And I felt so ashamed. And that wasn't why I bought it. I bought it because I was like, oh, there's a Black Widow #1. But I was like, it is a little creepy how they're presenting the characters. And so I never... that stuck in the back of my head when it came time to go buy issue #2. So I don't really remember the comic other than, and I've long since sold it when it was worth nothing. Now I'm sure it's worth, $20 or $30.
So, how much of the story...
I knew nothing. Nothing.
But did you know, were they supposed to be sisters? And I use air quotes for that.
My memory of it was they were... Well, what I do remember from that issue was going, oh, there was a bunch of Black Widows. That was when they introduced that idea.
Yeah.
And that is as much as I ever knew. Yelena had been, and I don't know what her relationship is. I've not seen her in another appearance. I think I've seen her pop up, in mass crowd scenes.
Yeah.
And, Infinity War type stuff in the Marvel comics, but I don't really remember. I don't know anything about her.
Okay. I was surprised... at the very, very beginning, when it started out, when they were in Ohio, they were supposed to be, a planted group of undercover.
I think that was made up for the movie.
That's what it felt like that was, the case.
Well, and I definitely thought a bit about, Scarlett Johansson has had a stunning track record of people getting very mad at her for playing things which she is not.
Yes.
And I imagine some of that was... I mean, it didn't have to be. It could have been easily they watched The Americans and said, oh, there's an idea.
Yeah, that's true. But it's also... I mean, it kind of explains why she has such a good American accent.
Yeah.
But then also... I mean... So her sister... And this was a little confusing to me. Everyone's accents were kind of confusing to me, I'll just be honest.
Yeah.
Her sister has the Russian accent.
Yeah.
Even though her early years were spent... She was probably 6 years old when they took her.
Yeah, but if you move someone to their accents, if they've only been speaking Russian, their accent's going to change.
I know, but she learned English with an American accent.
Yeah.
And then now she has a Russian accent when she speaks
Yeah, they
English.
all suddenly have Russian accents.
Yeah, the dad, Alexei, David Harbour. I mean, he kind of has an American accent in the very, very beginning, and then that's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's easier for them to speak English with a Russian accent.
Yeah, I
don't know. It's confusing.
I didn't know if they were doing a Hunt the Red October thing where they're like, if we speak with these Russian accents, we're speaking Russian. I couldn't really keep track because they were speaking Russian.
But they were speaking Russian, yeah, sometimes. So I don't know. It's fine. It shouldn't interfere with the story. It just it kind of doubles down on the Scarlett Johansson playing something she's not, which, you know, they're all Americans playing, as far as I know. I don't
Rachel
know.
Weisz is not.
She's not. Well, she's British.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh, I have no idea.
She's American.
She's American.
Or Canadian, I don't know.
Okay.
Which.
But, yeah. But, I mean, I'm trying not to do the thing where we watch a movie and immediately podcast on it and I'm, like, gushing all over it, because then inevitably I will watch it again or think about it for a while and I'm like, it wasn't that great. I mean, that's what happened with the last Spider-Man movie, like, Far From Home. Like, I've seen that movie maybe twice.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, like, singing its praises when we got home and then thinking about it on a few times and watching it again and we're like, well, it really wasn't that great. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I do think especially it's a 2-hour movie, and then there's 15 minutes of credits. We watched it on Disney Plus. We did the Premiere Access thing. That's our first Premiere Access thing.
That's another thing that I think was a factor, was watching it at home. I mean, I absolutely think I would have had a different experience at the theater to this on the big screen. Like, that's where it was meant to be seen. We don't have a tiny TV, but we don't have a huge theater.
Yeah,
so.
our couch doesn't shake when there's.
And we also, it makes a difference if you're seeing it with a group of people. There's just more energy in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the second hour of it, when they kind of slow things down a little bit and the characters kind of talk to each other, is when the movie really shines. And then you really care about the last hour of it. They've kind of set things up to where you get what the connection is and why you should care. But yeah, I mean, there's action scene after action scene in the first hour. And you're
it's not boring, but it's almost too much. Yeah.
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 And when we saw Terminator Dark Fate like 2 years ago, or whenever it was, one of the criticisms I had of it was, well, the action sequences are big and they're superhuman at some point, and people are made out of bone and gristle. And
that was one of my main complaints about this movie. And I know I've mentioned it before with Tony and his Iron Man suit and how he would be dead, a million times over. And at some point you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. It's a superhero movie. It's going to do what it's going to do. But there were so many instances in this movie where, like, there's a car exploded and it flipped over 1,000 times and they walked out and someone has a scratch. Like, dead. They would all be dead. Like, she falls from 8 stories up.
At least.
She would be dead 1,000 times over. And you just kind of have to just forget it at some point. But it's...
Well, it also takes away some
ridiculous.
of the risk of what you think you're seeing. So one of the things that I saw online last night as I was clicking through social media was they were like, well, clearly the filmmakers really liked Moonraker of all movies. There's some references definitely to Moonraker that you see it on TV at one point. That's what someone's watching.
I completely missed that.
And then there's the kind of the aerial sequences of them kind of fighting in the air, where like Taskmaster's flying through the air. That's directly lifted from a sequence in Moonraker where they're parachuting. Mm-hmm. And when you're watching it in Moonraker, those are real people who really jumped out of an airplane. Right,
yeah.
So that whole sequence, when you watch it, you're just like, oh my God. It's like watching a movie where they really film with sharks. You're like, this was a terrible idea.
Or
and I
lions
get to watch it. Yeah.
Roar.
But when it becomes, it's a CGI fest like that, and it's, Scarlett Johansson spending a week on wires.
Yeah.
In front of a green screen, and then she just softly alights to the ground.
That sequence bugged me. They're obviously really, really high up in the air because it takes them forever to get to the ground.
Yeah.
But then they're like bouncing off of hovercraft
debris
that's also falling, and I don't know. It's like physics. Yeah. It takes away from it when it doesn't feel realistic, and I feel like I don't know how much Marvel tries to make things seem realistic. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But
well, I think that's what made the prior Captain America movies work. Is one, Steve can he's a super soldier,
right? Yeah.
And I honestly expected when they got to the Red Room for them after all of that nonsense to go, oh, by the way, you got a little super soldier in you, which I would have said, oh, okay, like that explains how she's suddenly defying physics in this movie.
Yeah, that would have helped, but they didn't.
no, they didn't. And so yeah, it doesn't. I wouldn't say it wrecked the movie for me, but there was just a point at which with the action sequences, I was like,
she's a human.
Yeah.
She's really, really talented and she's trained very well, but people break.
Yeah. Yeah. It is more interesting if you feel there's actual risk to what's going on. But when someone is skidding along the side of debris as it falls in midair and they're keeping their sense of where they are with orientation and still fighting someone, at some point it's just too much.
Yeah.
It feels it gets to the point where I'm like, this is why people make fun of comic book movies.
It's not as bad as, say, the Transformer movie, in which it was just metal.
Oh, yeah.
A metal tornado.
Yeah.
Because they are people and you're able to, keep track of what's going on a little better. But it's a little bit of that. What am I looking at?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I mean, and like you said before, they were really good about that in Winter Soldier. The fighting in that, you could tell what was going on. It was very grounded.
Yeah. I mean, when an explosion happens, they always made sure to make sure Steve has his shield, and so you understand why he's bouncing around like a pinball, not just cause human body gets hurled, and he's he is held together better than the average human.
Yeah, and then even on the Red Room ship itself, when it starts blowing up, I mean, it's probably 15 minutes of them running around this ship that's getting destroyed, and they're running through fire and falling walls, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean there was definitely also something to the Red Room itself of it definitely suffered from the fact that this movie did not get released in chronological order, in that this guy's like, haha, I have this, world plan for world domination, and I'll control everything from this room and all the world leaders. And I'm like, you don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. would have been onto this guy?
Yeah. Well, S.H.I.E.L.D. had been taken over by Hydra, remember? I'm messing.
No, I know, but it what he said he was doing didn't, and that happens in comics, by the way, all the time, where, it's Secret Squirrel or whatever off having their side adventure, and it's the one villain for the story, and it's if this plan was actually occurring at the scale that the villain says it's occurring,
it was a ridiculous scale.
Yeah, and it felt to me like the whole movie just got away from them at some point, and which is kind of shocking that they didn't reel it back in, given that they had a year to do so. And
I kind of expected it to be a smaller movie.
Yeah. I expected it to be a regular spy movie.
Yeah, and it wasn't nestled in the overall story arc of Marvel, as much as the other ones are. They didn't reference other movies. I mean, you got the idea of where it took place in the other movies, because she does mention, we had a falling out with the Avengers, and at the end, I'm going to go find some people. But
yeah, it takes place chronologically immediately following Captain America 3.
Civil War and Infinity War.
Yeah.
And so when we were doing the Infinity War podcast, I think I said, I would watch a whole movie about what Nat and Steve and Sam were up to. Mm-hmm. We got part of that.
Yeah.
And we had,
Got half of that, yeah.
At the end, it's hinted that that's where she's off to. At the end, she's
wearing her Infinity War vest.
She is, and she's got the haircut too.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's cut her hair and she's like, dyed it blonde.
It matches my $7 action figure of her from that movie.
So we do catch the villain monologuing. You're talking about the villain a little bit. So there's a little bit of him being like a one-note mustache twirly guy, but on the other hand, like I feel
they really want
this.
Brian Cox
I'm about to get a little bit philosophical here.
Okay.
It's to the best of my ability. I'm not very good at that.
Let me don my tweed jacket.
Okay. So he makes a comment about she says, "Oh my gosh, all these girls that you've stolen," and he makes a comment about, "Well, no one cares about them." Mm-hmm. And I think 5 years ago I would have had the opinion of, "Oh, that's so just like over the top evil," but over the past 3, 4, 5 years, there are a lot of people out there with that attitude. Like they don't care about people at all. And certain groups of people, women, minorities, just across the board. And so that part was a little more believable to me than it would have been.
Yeah, that's when the movie really works. Mm-hmm. It was this weird thing of watching this film where you're like, well, that plot is insane, the villain's plot. And at the same time, you're like, but they kind of had to go over how crazy that was, or didn't actually kind of work within the Marvel U to get to what you just talked about. Because my first thought was how women, particularly in the northern border states in Mexico, keep disappearing. When he was talking about that, I mean, little girls aren't disappearing as much as women, but it's, yeah. It definitely tapped into something with that. You're right.
I also had the thought of, it's more believable to me that they set this Red Room story, like Marvel, like overall, like over the years, in Russia than doing it here. Because they do this whole thing. One, they put their trust in this group of women, they trust them to be badass soldiers, which I don't think that the majority of people, or a majority of people in power here, feel like women can do that. But also they sterilize them, and there's such a concentration about women as they give birth to the babies over here. Like that would never happen in America. So that was another thought that I had. Probably, not what they were going for, but something that I was thinking about.
Yeah, I did think a little bit last night after the movie about why did it have to be set in Russia? And I didn't necessarily come up with the same reason you did. I think those are great. They also called back to Nat at some point, I think in
it was in
Avengers 2.
The Avengers 2,
yeah.
Ultron, where she mentions that she had been sterilized.
Yeah. So it's I'm sure that's something that as they were sitting down to write it, if what has she said specifically?
And I think there was a great scene when they just picked up Red Guardian. So that's his name, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Yelena and Nat are going into great detail about, no, this is what they did to us. They ripped everything out, fallopian tubes, just, uterus, ovaries, it's all gone. And, of course, Alexi's back there going like, no, stop, don't talk about it. But yeah, I'm really glad that they went into detail about just like how much of a violation that is.
Yeah.
And how much they're taking, like they've taken away like everything from them. Like this is what your goal in life is, to like work for us. And by the way, you can never have family.
Yeah, and I think it's talking about where it would occur and kind of what the different mindsets are. Even when you're talking about like the Wolverine movies, like somehow they managed to separate it from the U.S. by going, "Oh, that was in Canada."
Right.
That's not us. All we did was Steve Rogers. But when they do find a way to do that stuff, it raises too many questions. And that's what I was thinking of, was just basic plot elements. Was at some point they'd have to say, well, this guy was actually like Rogue Shield or something if they were to set it in the U.S. And then there'd be this whole, well, why didn't they know about
Sure.
him? Oh my God, the atrocities this guy is doing. It manages to short, sharp shock of cutting that off of being a problem. If you say, actually, he's more of like Hydra was to the Nazis. He's a spin-off of kind of what the KGB was doing initially with the Black Widow program. And the interesting thing, of course, is that he got to up his game because people thought he was dead because of what Nat had done.
Right. Yes. They weren't concerned about the Red Room anymore because they didn't think it existed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I found that, and of course, there's all this stolen shield technology, which they never really got into. I mean, they're flying around in, new versions of Quinjets.
You know what? I didn't even piece that together, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So clearly the Russians were over here grabbing what they could and using it. Not that the Russian engineers have ever really had much of a problem of figuring out some pretty cool stuff on their own.
And Melina could have picked up some stuff while she was in the U.S. I mean, they were over there for 3 years, so
yeah. But yeah, it did have a lot of things I thought were kind of unusually clunky for a Marvel movie. Even, like Doctor Strange and Ant-Man are, some of the clunkier ones I'd seen kind of to date. But this one does have some really good character work when they get into the second hour.
Some excellent stuff. I said I'd never seen Florence Pugh before.
So I'd only just seen her in Midsummer. She's the lead in Midsummer.
Oh, okay. Well, I had seen that she was in Little Women, got nominated for Little Women, I think. So now I want to go watch Little Women.
Sure.
But I thought she was absolutely fantastic, and it didn't click with me that they were setting her up for future movies until the very end. Spoiler. But I'm excited. She's absolutely someone that I would be, excited to watch again.
She's very dinky.
Dinky?
She's very small.
Well, yeah. But
no, it doesn't mean I'm not excited about her, but I kept, both in Midsummer and this movie, I was like, how tall is that woman? And I looked it up and said she's 5'4". She's not 5'4". There's no way.
Well, she wasn't that much shorter than Scarlett, and she's not that tall, so.
I think she's a very small person.
Well, you're 6'5".
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, we're not talking about her size. I thought she was delightful in this. She managed to portray, I've had a really hard, shitty life, but still be delightful to watch at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like, she pulled that off, I thought. And she had a really good back and forth with Nat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think they were doing their level best to squeeze that in even before they ran in with the rest of the family.
Yeah, I mean, they could have so easily fallen into the trap of, oh, well, this has to be like buddy movie feeling of, oh, we're gonna clash heads and but it was so viable. I
think because they really tried to write them as sisters.
Yeah, like even they when they have their first downtime after they've escaped from everyone, they're not trying to bite each other's heads off. They're having a real conversation. And it's not as buddy as it gets, at the end. But, you have to build up to that. And I thought that part was really realistic.
Yeah. I mean, the whole movie is essentially about a very broken, damaged family kind of coming back together.
And they could have very easily had them be too similar. But it was like just the right balance of, so these kids grew up together for the first, this part of their life. They have like very, very similar early backgrounds and then went to the Red Room. But then after that, very, very different. So, Nat spent a lot of time in the U.S., a lot of time working with the Avengers, and she stayed, doing her I'm an assassin thing. So yeah, like it was very apparent, their similarities and their differences. And that worked for me.
Yeah. And it didn't hurt that, like you said, Florence Pugh's a strong actor. Scarlett Johansson we know to be one. And, David Harbour, for being kind of he's not exactly even ruggedly handsome, big goofy guy. I mean, he's just like spills charisma, which is why he's become so successful of late. Yeah. And
he cleans up well.
Okay.
But in this movie, he's a little he's a little bearded out, and he's been in jail for a while, so he's a little rough.
Yeah. And Rachel Weisz has been good and stuff it does have a small issue of she's supposed to be like 60.
I worried about that because I know she still looks really good.
She looks good for someone who's in their 40s.
Yeah, and she's supposed to have been living this rough Russian lifestyle.
And I'm like, you look amazing.
Out with the pigs, that she's training. So.
But yeah.
I mean, it helps that they're not her real kids. So who knows how young she was supposed to be when she, was posing as their mother, but still. Yeah.
And I don't blame anyone, but that was, I kind of kept, honestly, because of that, because they don't really age up David Harbour either over the 20 years, kind of kept waiting. That was part of why I was thinking, do they have a little bit of super soldier in them?
Yeah, that explains him.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's why, Nat can crash a car and just go, whoops,
That would have helped a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I also understand they don't want to have super soldier formula just scattered, which Marvel Comics, by the way, have this massive, like, I'm sure if you were to do a crazy Charlie Day web board thing, of how Weapon X is tied to the super soldier thing, and so is the Hulk, and like everything in the Marvel U basically ends up tied one way or another back to trying to create super soldiers. But anyway,
Speaking of super soldiers, I was really hoping that all of those dudes that were in that prison were super soldiers, because are we to believe that they are all dead? And that is now their fault?
In the prison.
In the prison.
Well, the prison got covered in a smattering of snow. So if they went back inside, they should have been fine.
There were a lot of people that were not inside.
They weren't going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was Yelena's fault. She's the one that caused the avalanche. I know she wasn't intentional, but as they were flying off and cracking jokes and stuff, I'm like, but you just killed like hundreds of people. I know you're not supposed to focus on that, but it's in the back of my head.
Yeah, for some reason I thought they'd all, when they saw the snow, run back inside.
Maybe they did. We'll go with that.
I think you can assume several of the guards and whatnot, the blameless guards, got death starred. Yeah.
Okay.
They also did the thing of covering in the Red Room, who I assume were men. All of the guards had masks.
They were all stormtroopers.
Yeah, so you never think of them as people. So you can they got blown up, whatever.
Yeah, Wilhelm scream.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, because I honestly, with the movie, I said, oh, it clocked in at 2 hours before the credits. I could have let them have their full action sequences. I needed another 20 minutes of that movie.
Yeah.
I needed more character stuff in it.
I agree, because that was the strongest element, and I felt a little bit shortchanged on it. Yeah. Because that's the best part of the Marvel movies. I mean, you go into it a little bit for the, fantastical, oh, these people can manipulate time and do whatever trick they've got up their sleeve, but it's mostly for, I want to watch superheroes palling around. What do they do in their off time? That's what's fun about it. It makes them feel human, and it makes them relatable.
Yeah,
it makes them care about them.
I mean, if you go back and watch, I know we keep holding up Winter Soldier as the apex of these kinds of movies, but it kind of is, and
still the best one.
I mean, there's a lot of Steve and Natasha just driving around talking.
My favorite parts, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walking through the mall, chit-chatting.
Yeah.
Even when they're doing something, but they're still talking.
Yeah.
Which, up to and including the point of, even as they're throwing Stillwell off the building, she's still thinking of people for Steve to ask out, right? So, that's the kind of stuff that this, I think it could have done more with. I think they could have done a little bit more of, they find the Red Room by just asking someone who tells them.
Right.
And I feel like you had an opportunity to have a movie that was going to be a little more espionage heavy. For example, the Red Guardian never needed to be in jail for this movie to work. That
actually was confusing for me. Maybe because they wanted him to be out of practice. More of a... But I think if they were going to do that, they needed to focus more on him and his story, and I guess they didn't want to go that route, which, it's not his movie. But yeah, that... I guess maybe, we got to break him out of there or something.
Yeah, they wanted an action set piece, which you don't get if you're like, he's just become a bureaucrat and he's gotten soft.
Yeah.
And it can also suggest he has kept a little bit because he's had to, fight dudes in prison and whatnot.
Yeah. Sorry to jump tracks a little bit, but you just reminded me of this. So you had mentioned Winter Soldier, and a good part of that being Steve and Natasha, palling around. You do get the sense that Nat's a different person now. She plays the character much differently because of what went down in Civil War. And I'm trying to remember, Winter Soldier came before or after? It became before Age of Ultron. So we've had Age of Ultron and Civil War in between these two movies. And I think she's a little more, she's all her friends have, gone away. And I think that's part of why it works, her reconnecting with this family. But yeah, I really like how she played Natasha and, with that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's of the characters, it gets her, it's a good kind of fill in the blanks, fill in the gap to get her to be the person who she is by the time you get to Endgame. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Or where she spends her 5 years of time between Infinity War and Endgame. Right. Yeah. Yep.
And there was something else I was going to add to that, and I can't remember, so let's just move on.
Sorry. But yeah, I do... Some of the action stuff worked. I thought really, really well. I thought the inclusion and massive changes they made to Taskmaster worked very well on this. Milieu. Taskmaster, I first became familiar with, of all places, in the John Walker Captain America comics.
Oh, interesting.
He trained John Walker how to throw the shield in the comics. And because he knew how to do it, and it's so simple for me, so it's really hard to train you, sort of thing. But it was also a dude, right?
Yeah.
That was his mutant ability.
I did like that Nat caught the shield at one point, and she's like, yeah, she knows how to use that. I mean, not heavily, but she's handled it before for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it had a lot of good bits. And would like to see these characters again. I'm sure they'll find the Black Widow family TV show or something to do. It's at the end, the post-credit sequence has Julia Louis-Dreyfus returning as she had in Captain America or Falcon and Winter Soldier.
What I hadn't thought about that I was reading is that this was supposed to be released before Falcon and Winter Soldier. So this was supposed to be her first appearance.
Yeah, which made me wonder if they edited it a bit or reshot it.
Maybe.
To make it... I mean, because there's no I'm...
Yeah. Well, yeah, they for sure changed her introduction in Falcon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So... But yeah, I mean, it's clearly setting up whatever the next phase is, at least for Earth-based Marvel characters.
Yeah, and there's a whole slew of ex-Black Widows out there they could do something with.
Yeah. The setup they were really doing, I think, at the end was for the Hawkeye TV show, which is coming.
Yeah.
Hawkeye.
I just remembered what I was going to talk about.
Yeah?
Yeah, because it's related to Hawkeye. I noticed, so when we did the Age of Ultron podcast, I mentioned that I had a big problem with them switching around, Nat and Clint are not an item anymore, and how that was confusing to me because in Winter Soldier, she was wearing an arrow necklace the whole time. Mm-hmm. The arrow necklace is back in this. She's wearing it again. Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
So I'm not saying that, they're hooking up on the side. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that they're that good of friends, I guess, that she's wearing that.
Yeah.
And I don't remember her wearing it in anything else, but she's got it on again.
Yeah, maybe it'll pop up in the Hawkeye TV show.
I mean, I feel like that may be a Scarlett Johansson thing, because she was like really behind that in Winter Soldier, and she's an executive producer on this, so she's like, I'm wearing it again. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
so small. I almost missed it, but I kept seeing something glimmer on her neck, and I was like, what the heck is that? And then later on in the movie, I was like, that's the damn arrow necklace. So yeah.
So I think the Hawkeye TV show is currently filming, possibly.
Yes.
So it should be out, in the future at some point. I think next up is another Spider-Man movie.
Sure. I really haven't been keeping track. I know I should, but this past year has just thrown everything off. So yeah, I know Thor's filming right now.
Thor's done filming.
Finishing filming.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Spidey comes out at Christmas.
Yeah. We will get back to the other ones. Here's what happened: we recorded Thor Ragnarok in November.
Yeah.
And Ryan's computer only saved 5 minutes of it, and then we got really depressed and just didn't feel like re-recording it. So.
And I do actually want to do a Falcon and Winter Soldier, and maybe we'll do a jumbo Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki.
That would be fun, yeah.
And kind of cover all of that territory.
If I remember Falcon and Winter Soldier by then.
I only have a few things I want to say about it.
Sure, okay.
So, but yeah, I do want to get back on track and eventually wrap all of this up. If I start feeling more like I want to go into a movie theater, which we have to have better vaccine rates and all that before I'm wanting to do that or pay for the Alamo's apparently terrible new menu. Then I'm hoping they re-release this, so I have an opportunity to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a smart move for them. Depends on how well received it is. I don't know what the feedback is yet.
I don't know. All I saw was box office for yesterday, and it did pretty well. So
Good.
We'll see.
Well, I'm about done.
Okay.
We talked for longer than I expected to for a movie I just saw and haven't thought about that much. So.
Sure. So anyway, leave comments on either the SoundCloud or the blog. Love to hear what you think about Black Widow. I know that $30 premium premiere access is a lot to think about, but if you think about what it costs to go to the movies,
I felt it was entirely worth it. I did have some issues with it, but I enjoyed the movie. I really did.
Yeah. It's easy to nitpick. It's hard to quantify
absolutely
what actually worked about it.
Yeah. I thought more of it worked than didn't. You know,
Agreed. So
it's light years better than Wonder Woman was.
Oh yeah.
Not even in the same ballpark.
Yeah. Wonder Woman made me
angry,
and this movie, I was like, yeah, it's weird they did that.
Yeah, totally.
So, anywho, go enjoy some Black Widow again and again. If you've paid for the premiere access, you now own it, so you might as well. And we'll be back soon.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 2. So we were supposed to do this a week ago. We watched Black Widow about 2 weeks ago. And then we were supposed to do, and then I ate a bad taco. And I was sick for like 3 days, and we just never really got our act together to follow up. So it's been 2 weeks. It's actually been probably too long to actually do a part 2. But there was some stuff we didn't cover when we were talking about Black Widow, kind of the first go around. And so did you have anything in particular that...
Oh, just one thing that I had forgotten to mention, which is not plot relevant at all, but I did notice that in the score, there are definitely some sequences that are reminiscent of... Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Not reminiscent, like straight out, like this is part of the score from Winter Soldier.
Yeah, and one of the things I know I didn't talk about that I should have is, the fact that, part of it was after we watched Black Widow. I guess that was the Friday night it came out.
Right.
Then TBS and TNT were running Marvel movies, as they do every time a new Marvel movie comes out, like on a loop. And of course, we'd stop and watch 30, 40 minutes of one of them and then go on with whatever we were doing. And I was like, oh, right, Civil War, all the other mind-controlled, it's not just Bucky. Like, this is a thing the Russians were doing.
Yeah.
That this is a continuation of. And it's just something that I meant to pull together as another Marvel U thread of, whatever the evil, Hydra Russians were up to.
Yeah, and you did mention that you had somewhat wished they had gone ahead and said they had given the Black Widows the serum because... of all of the crazy shit that they were surviving in this movie was a little unbelievable.
Yeah. Which was weird because I've only seen one other place, aside from us having the conversation about it. I think it was was it the pitch meeting?
It was pitch meeting.
Yeah, it was the Screen Rant pitch meeting video where he talks about all the things they survive. And I've talked to a lot of people about this movie, and like everyone's like, I love it. And not one person has mentioned like, and I think that's kind of weird. Like, Marvel and all superheroes kind of have their different levels.
People have been conditioned to just go with the flow on that, but
yeah. If it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother you.
It happens in enough action movies these days, and we don't. I really don't watch that many action movies that aren't Marvel movies. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess if
know.
you're watching like the Fast and the Furious and they're like driving cars from building to building,
Yeah.
like you're like whatever, physics are for suckers.
Yeah, but I'm used to like people surviving these things in Marvel movies because they have superpowers.
Right.
And she is absolutely 100% human. So bones would break, you know?
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest things that we didn't talk about was really the using the mind control as a what is the kind of subtext of the movie? What are they saying by letting the Black Widow finally have her own movie and be in control? And Scarlett Johansson was an executive producer on this. She had a lot of say in what was going to happen with the story. And what the movie talks about, I'm using the one thing there's way too much of, or whatever is considered garbage, and that's little girls.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about that briefly.
Yeah. And it kind of translates into this, into kind of the, what are the, what is the agency that any of these characters actually have, and then how do they get it back? And yeah, I mean, that's of course a lot of what the movie's about, and reflecting on kind of where Scarlett Johansson's been in these movies, and kind of initially seen as, a sex object, definitely when she shows up in Iron Man 2.
The outfit, for sure. I mean, the fact that she's allowed to wear, full head to toe cover up in this. Well, part of it is that it's very cold, but it's also, directed by a woman, so these things are considered.
Yeah, I mean, and I in Scarlett Johansson, I've read in the past 2 weeks also talking about how she looks at those early appearances and kind of cringes a little bit.
Sure.
Tony has lines like, "Oh, I want one," and
Yeah.
when she appears and stuff.
Yeah, which I hate that line.
Yeah,
We already talked about in that movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's you could spend a college thesis breaking apart, how this movie does and does not achieve, and I've seen 20 thought pieces on coming down on either side of whether or not it actually achieves what it's trying to do. Complaining about the fact that Taskmaster doesn't get her own story.
Yeah, she doesn't get to have any lines.
Yeah. All she does is basically get to come to consciousness. And I've seen, complaints about that. I don't know how seriously I take that as a criticism, partially because it's Marvel. She's not dead. And so you don't know what her next chapter is.
Right, yes.
And so when people kind of go, oh, they didn't cover this in the movie, it's like, well, A, they were doing like 4 other people's stories. So, dial it back.
Trying to focus on the family.
Yeah. And 2, now we have ex-Black Widows, Strike Force running around out there. And who knows if, in 4 years, if we're going to have a show on Disney, I said Marvel Plus, on Disney Plus,
Give it time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see Loki coming, so I certainly, don't know what to think of, the fact that they left that as an open door. But I think in Marvel, there's always opportunity for whatever they're going to do next, and we know we haven't seen the last of Yelena by the end of the film, so
yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a ton of other stuff to say, but I did want to, kind of do, okay, it's been 2 weeks. The movie's been in the cultural conversation.
I did read something from Steven. I don't know if you read Steven's blog post on this movie.
But I can't remember it right now.
She brought up something that had not even occurred to me, that...
that if there were children in the Red Room, they killed all of them?
Ooh. Wow. Yeah. Not that. No, that her confrontation with the evil bad guy at the end, and not being able to do anything to him because of the pheromones,
Yeah.
was really reminiscent of young women's experiences in Hollywood.
Oh,
And the whole Me Too movement. Like,
I think he was Harvey Weinstein-esque intentionally. And
I wish I had. I mean, the second I read that, I was like, oh, of course. But it didn't occur to me while I was watching it, so I have to give props to Stephen for that.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a different level or kind of menace there that because it's not a physical thing. It's just their presence and their place and in the power structure of definitely part of that. We could write a college thesis on that. But I mean, particularly for someone, I don't know what Scarlett Johansson's particular story is.
I think there was some stuff. I mean, she was around during that time. She was very young when she came in, so she's got to have some stories. Yeah,
I'm sure. There was also a story I saw today that Scarlett Johansson has, if you add up what people believe to be her salaries from her movies, made something like $200 million less than George Clooney, who hasn't had a successful movie like ever.
Yeah.
Unless it's been a Soderbergh movie.
Yeah.
So that's unrelated necessarily to Black Widow.
Yeah, but the amount of money her movies have made.
Yeah.
That she's been in. It's says a lot.
So I mean, it's I think there's a lot more going on with that villain than I think people kind of wanted to give him that movie credit for on kind of first blush. He seems like a one-note villain in a lot of ways. He doesn't really appear till the end. He's just kind of
it's
this
more
figure
of what
from
he
the past.
represents.
Yeah. And I mean, I will still say, they could have made the conspiracy smaller in scale than
I do agree with that. Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No.
Oh,
I was just agreeing with you.
Sorry, I thought I was talking over you.
No, you weren't.
Anyway, and then it's funny, the more I've thought about the movie, we've just been busy and I've been sick, since I've thought about it a lot, not just because it's been in the press, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I think I really liked that movie, which I'm not sure that's how I felt when I initially walked away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I felt like our first part of this review was just a lot of nitpicking on our part. And I really want to go back and watch it again, which we've not done. Just to, after the Olympics are over, we'll watch it again.
The Olympics started Friday and it's Sunday, so we're probably 2 weeks out from watching it again. But actually, I might have to sneak it in because it might get pulled from after a month. So
did pay $30 for it.
Oh, then it means we have it forever. Never mind.
Oh,
yeah, we're good.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's. Anyway, I've thought very fondly of it. I've seen a few clips here and there in commercials and been like, that scene was really good.
Yeah.
Like her talking about her pockets.
Yeah.
Like I was like, yeah, sure, they just murdered a whole bunch of people, but the pockets thing's still cute.
They were really cute while they were doing it.
And I've of course been very curious as to what's next for White Widow or whatever we're gonna call.
Yeah, let's not have
Pocket Widow.
Let's not have 20 movies before we get another female-led movie.
I think on that front,
I know there's another Captain Marvel coming.
I think Marvel's, because the Ms. Marvel show is coming.
Right.
That's already been filmed. And we've seen other Captain Marvel show up in WandaVision. So
right.
Anyway, stay tuned. More to come, I guess.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
So bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this'll be the day that I die. this'll be the day that I die. Did you write the book of love, and do you have faith in God above? If the Bible tells you so. Now, do you believe in rock and roll? Can music save your mortal soul? And can you teach me how to dance real slow?
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.